I landed in Florence with one suitcase, a mild sunburn from Barcelona, and 3 Tinder matches already swiping through my stories. The plan was simple. Cheap room, pasta in the plaza, art I pretended to care about, and maybe a story to tell someone hot over drinks back home in Chicago. The hotel I booked looked good in photos. Moody lighting, exposed brick, faux Renaissance headboards. In real life, it was a glorified hallway. I swear the entire building had the vibe of a Craigslist couch listing. Functional, kind of sketchy, and definitely full of stains. There was no front desk, just a WhatsApp number taped to a wall and some vague instructions. Every room had an electric key and 0 human interaction. I called it ghost check-in. Obviously, I managed to lock my keycard in the room. My wallet, my phone charger, and my last protein bar were trapped inside. I WhatsApped the reception, which was probably just some guy vaping in a car. They replied 20 minutes later. Code to the office, 1397. Master key inside drawer. I found the office. I found the drawer. I found staples, an old map of Florence, and a dusty copy of Eat, Pray, Love, but no master key. I tore the place apart like a cracked-out raccoon in a trash can. Nothing. Someone will come. Traffic bad, the WhatsApp dude said. No ETA, no apology. I had a walking food tour booked in an hour. I figured, screw it. I'd go smell some cheese and drink some olive oil shots. Maybe the key situation would resolve itself. By the time I got to the tour, I was cranky, undercaffeinated, and looking like a girl who just emotionally yelled at a bookshelf. Our guide, Marco, was hot and a bit disheveled in that art school dropout kind of way. Hair messy on purpose, voice like melted cannolis. "Hi," I blurted too loud. I locked myself out of my room. The hotel staff might be a catfish. He grinned. "That's very Florent of them." Mid-tour, while we dipped chunks of bread into spicy olive tapenade, I confessed the full saga. He laughed like it wasn't his problem, which it wasn't, and offered to walk me back after the tour. "Dave might have fixed it," he said, hands in his back pockets, like he didn't care if he had or hadn't. They hadn't. I stood outside my locked door, growing increasingly aware of how absolutely no one else seemed to be staying in this hotel. Marco leaned against the wall. "You could crash at mine," he said. Now listen, I wasn't born yesterday. I was born 2 decades ago to Milwaukee and raised by a single mom who once punched a guy for touching her hair. But also, he was hot. It was dark, and I always wanted to say yes to a stranger in Europe. "All right," I said. His apartment was 5 blocks away, up 3 flights of stairs that creaked like they were narrating my bad choices. It was cozy, books stacked sideways, vintage records, incense that smelled like regret. We hooked up, obviously. It was the kind of night you have when you're not sure if you'll see the person again and really don't care either way. I fell asleep on a futon with a hole in the cushion. The next morning, he was already dressed, a scarf slung around his neck like a budget art critic. He muttered something about tours and time and stress. "I have 3 groups today," he said, kissing my forehead. I took that as text me later, which I did, twice, and no reply. Now here's where I probably should have let it go. Should have gotten a cannoli, visit Duomo, and then cry in a bathroom stall like a reasonable adult. Instead, I went to his apartment. I figured it would be romantic, a chaotic American girl surprising her Tuscan fling. Maybe we'd hook up again. Maybe he'd give me a free gelato. What I found instead was a blonde woman in a silk shirt passed out on his couch. "Marco?" I called out. He walked out of the bathroom in just a towel. When he saw me, his face froze like someone had pressed pause. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Guess you found your master key," I said, flipping him off. I left without waiting for an answer. I bought pizza and cried for 20 seconds, and then I decided that I would stalk his next tour. It wasn't hard. His voice carried across the piazza like a TED Talk. He was talking to a group of tourists about Michelangelo's David, probably inventing half the facts. I walked right up, right in front of the group of Midwestern women who were already in love with him. He saw me, and I saw him see me. Then I punched him. Just once, just hard enough that he stumbled back. "My ex is a boxer," I announced, even though he wasn't. And I lied about locking myself out. I just wanted to see if the sex would be worth it. It wasn't. Gasps, laughter, and one guy clapped. I walked away like I was on fire. 2 days later, I checked into a real hotel with real staff, and I didn't touch the minibar at a principal. I slept like a Roman goddess. That would have been the end of it, except a week later, someone DM'd me on Instagram. It had a screenshot of a TripAdvisor review. "Marco was charming, but don't fall for it. My friend got scammed the exact same way. She stayed in one of the hallway hostels he manages. He picks a girl, plays hero, then rescues her to his apartment." I stared at the screen. He worked at the hotel. He locked me out on purpose. The whole office key bullshit was theater. The WhatsApp replies? Probably him in the next room. And I fell for it. I wish I could say I was shocked or heartbroken or even embarrassed. But honestly, I'm impressed. It was a thought-out con with great lightning. My friend back in Chicago said I should report him, but I didn't. I wrote this story instead. Because sometimes heartbreak isn't the villain. Sometimes it's just the foreplay. And Florence wasn't real. It was just the set. The story was inspired from a real-life travel story shared by one of my really pretty Broccoli fam subscribers. She told me the following. The place I was staying at in Florence was more of a corridor lined with rooms than a proper hotel. Each room had a key card entry, but there was no staff on site, just a number to call for help. Naturally, I managed to lock myself out. I messaged the contact and sent me a code to access the admin room where a universal key was supposedly kept. I searched that office like a detective in a crime show, every drawer and shelf, and nothing. They said someone would come by, but traffic was bad and it would take time. I had a tour book, so I figured I would go and do that while it updated, but the message never came. I told my tour guide what was going on, and since I was the last person on the tour, he offered to walk me back. Seeing my situation, he invited me to crash at his place for the night, and while one thing led to another, it was impulsive, I guess. But we're still in touch and chat often, so no regrets. The cleaning lady finally got me back in my room at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Mia was a beautiful woman, but she had some serious body issues. Her ex-husband Derek treated her horribly, constantly pointing out minor flaws and making her feel like an ugly whale that no one would ever love. The marriage ended 2 years ago, but the emotional scars remained. She met a new man, John, who finally made her feel like the smart, beautiful woman she really was. John and Mia loved each other dearly, and if things had been different, they would have married this December. Mia spent months planning the wedding. She wanted everything perfect. There was still a part of her whispering in the back of her brain, telling her that she didn't deserve someone like John. As the wedding got closer, she became more anxious. She was barely eating anything, trying to get as thin as possible. Everyone else could see that she was absolutely gorgeous, but when she looked at her reflection, she hated the image that looked back. She decided that she needed plastic surgery, just a little liposuction around the stomach and fillers on her butt. John had plenty of money, but she didn't dare ask him. Instead, she found a budget-friendly clinic that could give her everything she wanted at a fraction of the price. In her heart, she knew that this was a bad idea. The clinic itself was located in a run-down warehouse with no signage in the front. But still, she couldn't stop herself. When she arrived at her appointment, the doctor greeted her directly. No receptionists, no one else in the building at all, just her and an old man in a lab coat. He tried to calm her nerves and assure her that even though he no longer had his license, he was a great doctor. She didn't believe it, but she followed him into the operating room anyway. The doctor set her up on the table, administered the anesthesia, and she drifted off to sleep. She never woke up. Hours later, John came home from work. He had a particularly good day, landing 2 new accounts. He couldn't wait to tell his fiancée the good news. She wasn't home. He tried calling her phone, but she didn't answer. He checked the calendar to make sure she didn't have any appointments. After checking with her mother, he really started to worry. This wasn't like her at all. He called the police. They promised to help, but they didn't have a lot of information to go on. Eventually, John found an address written on a post-it note. He knew it was in a sketchy part of town, and there was some part of him that knew with absolute certainty that this was where she'd gone. He drove there right away, immediately nervous at the sight of the crumbling warehouse. Without any backup plan, and with no one knowing where he was, John stepped inside. The place was filthy. It looked like a makeshift medical office. The door was unlocked, but no one was there. He looked around the waiting room, wincing at the stains on the tile. Then he pushed his way into a hallway. Finally, he heard a noise. Footsteps behind a door. He entered an operating room and saw what was left of his fiancée. Mia? His brain couldn't process what he was seeing. This was his beautiful fiancée, dead on a slab. It couldn't be possible. There had to be a mistake. This morning she'd been so full of life, and now she was gray and empty. I am so sorry for your loss. John spun around to see a man in a blood-stained lab coat. The butcher who had done this to the love of his life. The man stepped closer, explaining that Mia had a complication with her liposuction. He sounded guilty and regretful, but as he got closer, John could see the needle in his hand. John was a witness to his illegal practice, and now the doctor was going to get rid of him. John pretended like he didn't notice. He waited for the doctor to get close enough before he grabbed the metal tray covered with the surgical tools and slammed it into the man's face. The doctor toppled backward, the syringe rolling out of his hand. John grabbed it and placed the needle next to his neck. Why did you do this to her? Because she was stupid and thought she wasn't beautiful. John was filled with rage, though it wasn't all directed at this murderous doctor. Half of it was directed at Derek, Mia's ex-husband, the man who had spent years teaching Mia that she was ugly, that she needed fixing. He jabbed the needle into the doctor's neck and injected the knockout liquid that was meant for him. Then, he locked him inside the room with the remains of his wife and walked away. 10 minutes later, he was at Derek's house. He'd never met the man before, but he'd heard plenty of stories about him. As always, Derek was drunk, so it didn't take a lot of effort to convince him to go with John for a free consultation at a brand new medical clinic. John took him back to the warehouse and led him into another operating room, where the drunken idiot sat and waited. By then, the doctor had woken up. Here's the deal. I'll let you leave before I call the police as long as you do one final surgery. Can you do that? The doctor agreed. Make sure you treat your new patient exactly how you treated Mia. The doctor understood exactly what he meant. So, John led him to the other room where Derek was waiting for what he deserved. John shut the door behind him, feeling the sick thrill of revenge racing through his heart. While the doctor performed his very last surgery, and Derek took his very last breath, John called the police. Despite what he promised, he didn't wait to call them. This story is loosely inspired from a real-life event. In 2025, a 38-year-old man was arrested after an illegal plastic surgery procedure at his home left a 31-year-old woman brain dead. The victim went into cardiac arrest after receiving a lidocaine injection for butt implant removal. The medics discovered a makeshift clinic in his Astoria apartment. The man, unlicensed in the U.S., fled but was arrested at the airport. Prosecutors cited lidocaine toxicity as the likely cause. The victim remained on life support with no brain activity. I had the best job in the world. I worked at a collectible shop where we had a bunch of vintage comic books, trading cards, and all sorts of cool stuff. Everything was pretty valuable and pretty expensive, so we had a security guard outside at all times. One day, I was manning the front desk, scrolling through my phone, when Freddie walked in. Our regular security guard was on vacation, so Freddie was filling in. I didn't really know him that well. He was a little younger than me, pretty friendly. Sometimes he'd bring me donuts from the bakery near his house. "Hey, since no one's here, do you think you can show me some of the stuff that I'm here to guard?" Our regular guard hadn't done anything like that, so I didn't know how to react. We had very strict rules about the merchandise. But since he was my coworker, I thought, why not? I asked him if there was anything specific that he wanted to see, and he immediately mentioned our Pokemon cards. We had a binder of them in the display. Most were pretty cheap, but we had a few ultra-rare ones that were worth thousands. I never got into Pokemon, it just wasn't my thing. But our selection drew in a lot of customers. I pulled out the binder and placed it in front of him. Wearing my plastic gloves, I flipped through the pages and showed Freddie what we had. I could tell he wasn't really paying attention. He kept glancing back toward the front door. "So, if you added all of these up, how much would this whole binder be worth?" I couldn't give him a specific answer. It was worth a lot, though. I asked him if he had any other questions. He didn't, so I closed the binder and started to put it back. That's when he leaned over the glass counter and sprayed pepper spray right into my eyes. The pain was indescribable. I had no idea that pepper spray would hurt so much, or that it would fill up your lungs. I couldn't breathe. I thrashed around blindly until I made it to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. That helped a little, but everything was still really blurry. When I stumbled back to the counter, Freddie was gone. So were all the Pokemon cards. I called the police and reported the theft. They said that they would arrive in a half hour. I guess stolen Pokemon cards weren't among their top priorities. Then I called my boss, Hank, to explain the situation. To say that Hank was furious would be an understatement. He screamed through the phone, demanding to know why I'd allowed this to happen. How was I supposed to know that our security guard was a thief? It wasn't my fault. Hank arrived before the police did. He was a fat, older guy, and he loved his store more than anything else. He'd always been nice to me before, but now he treated me like garbage. He didn't care that my eyes were puffy and crying. He said that if we didn't get his cards back, I was fired. Well, as I stood there, too angry to say anything, Hank pulled out his phone and tried Freddie's number. Surprisingly, Freddie answered right away. I only heard Hank's side of the conversation, so I didn't understand what they were talking about. It sounded like there was some kind of misunderstanding. He ended the call and turned back toward me. "Tell me exactly what Freddie looks like." I didn't understand the question, but I answered him anyway. Young, short, kinda chubby, blonde hair. Well, then Hank showed me the contact photo on his phone. The picture was a man in his 50s. He was black. Apparently, the real Freddie, the guy that Hank actually hired, decided to work elsewhere. The guy who had been guarding our shop for the last 2 weeks was an imposter. The whole thing was a con job. He even disabled the security cameras without us knowing. I know it sounds crazy, and it was a lot of work just to steal frickin' Pokemon cards, but that's what happened. The police eventually came. We told them everything, but without Freddie's real identity, there wasn't a lot for them to work with. More than that, they really didn't seem to take this seriously. They promised they'd look into it, but I had a feeling those cards were gone forever. After they left, Hank told me again that if he didn't get those cards back, I was fired. He didn't care that none of this was my fault. I left after that. I needed to buy some drops for my eyes. I was angry at fake Freddie, but I was even angrier at Hank. I'd had this job for 3 years. I was a great worker, and the customers all liked me. I was going to drive home and sulk, but on the drive, I passed by the bakery where fake Freddie had gotten donuts. This was the neighborhood where he lived. That was the one piece of information I knew about him. I forgot to tell the police. Well, I parked right in front and went inside to ask the baker if he knew a short, chubby blonde guy who liked donuts. I was going to find him myself. The baker was super helpful, telling me the guy's real name, Tony, and his apartment number in the building across the street. I felt like a real detective. It was kind of exciting. 2 minutes later, I was knocking on his door. "Donuts!" Tony stupidly opened the door and I pushed my way inside. I grabbed him by the collar and demanded the cards back. Without his pepper spray, he was really easy to overpower. He immediately started to cry. "Don't hurt me! I'm sorry! I'm sorry!" I let him go. I could already see the binder on his coffee table. I grabbed it and headed for the door. He didn't fight me. Instead, he begged me to reconsider. That binder was worth $62,000, and he suggested that we split it. 62 grand? That was way more than I realized. No wonder Hank had been so upset. "Sorry, Freddie." I made sure to use his fake name. "I'm going to return this. If you come near the shop again, I'll have you arrested." And with that, I left. Feeling very proud of myself, I marched back to my car. I was all set to return the cards and get my job back. But then I thought, screw it. Hank was a terrible boss. With these cards, I didn't need to work for him anymore. 3 months later, all the cards were sold. I have enough in my bank account to take a nice, long vacation. I haven't been back to the shop since. This story was inspired from a real-world event. The Berkeley Public Safety Department was called to assist in an arrest for retail fraud at 8:49 p.m. on January 25th at 2666 Coolidge Highway. According to the report, officers were sent to Collectible Investments to help Clinton Township Police take a first-degree retail fraud suspect into custody. The suspect, a 27-year-old Mount Clemens man, allegedly stole $10,000 worth of Pokemon cards. Clinton Township Police advised Berkeley officers that the suspect had walked into a business in the township and had stolen a black binder containing the cards before fleeing the location. The owner of the business called other stores in the area and confirmed that the suspect was at Collectible Investments. Dispatchers forwarded a description of the suspect while the police arrived at Collectible Investments. Officers walked in and observed the suspect sitting at a table speaking with an employee appraising the cards. Officers identified the suspect and placed him under arrest. I've worked hard my whole life. I excelled at school, participated in a bunch of clubs, and did all the cooking and cleaning at home. My parents died when I was really young, so my older brothers, Henry and Andrew, had to sacrifice a lot to keep our family afloat. Neither of them finished high school because they needed jobs to support us. Because of their help and my hard work, I was able to attend a prestigious university on a scholarship. I couldn't afford living in the dorms, though, so I had to stay with my brothers and commute every day. I was doing well with my classes, but I had trouble making friends. Most of my classmates were from ultra-rich families. They took one look at me in my thrift store clothes and knew that I wasn't one of them. I thought that I'd escaped all that judgmental bullying once I'd graduated from high school, but it was so much worse in college. I felt like a pariah. I didn't tell any of this to my brothers, though. They both worked so hard as construction workers, so I felt awkward unloading my minor problems on them. They could tell I was upset, though, especially Henry. He knew me better than anyone. One day, I came home from classes to find both my brothers waiting for me at the dinner table. "Gia, you have to tell us what's bothering you." So I did. I unloaded everything on them. How everyone knew I was poor. How people avoided me and laughed behind my back. How I felt like a freak. I guess I was crying because Henry stood up and hugged me. Then he went back to Andrew. They whispered something to each other, but when I asked them what they were talking about, they refused to answer. All Henry said was, "Things will get better, we promise. Just hang in there." It was a weird conversation, but I didn't really think about it afterward. A week later, I came home from school to find Henry and Andrew excitedly waiting for me in the living room. They had a pile of clothes on the couch. What are these? Presents for you. We got a huge discount. My brothers were friends with a bunch of delivery guys, so it wasn't unusual for them to bring home stuff that had fallen off the back of a truck, so to speak. However, they had never brought home such a huge amount of stuff at one time. They had dozens of outfits, all in my size, and each one looked new and expensive. I wrapped them both in a big hug and thanked them over and over. This was exactly what I needed to fit in at school. My classmates would finally stop treating me like a homeless person. I rushed up to my room to try on each outfit. Miraculously, every single one fit me perfectly. When I went back downstairs to show them my favorite outfit, they were gone. Well, probably they had to get back to work. Alone in the house, I spent the next few hours studying. I had the news playing in the background just to help me concentrate. I wasn't really paying attention to the TV until a news report came on about a robbery. 2 large men in ski masks robbed a high-end fashion store and made off with thousands of dollars of clothes. I looked up at the screen, my heart racing. They played security camera footage of the robbery. The 2 men were each armed with tasers, threatening the workers and acting really intimidating. Even though I couldn't see their faces, I knew it was Henry and Andrew. I watched in horror as my brothers threatened the poor shop assistants. When one man tried to stop them, Andrew tased him. The man fell to the floor, flopping around and whimpering. The robbers tased 3 employees during the robbery, including one man who suffered a heart attack. Police are requesting any information to help identify these men. I couldn't breathe. I was having a panic attack. My brothers had robbed that store because of me. And now someone was in a life and death situation. What was I going to do? I couldn't turn them in, but I couldn't stay silent about this. If they got away with it, then I'd feel guilty for the rest of my life. It took me a long time to catch my breath. After that, I couldn't concentrate on my textbook. I couldn't do anything besides sit there and wait for my brothers to come home. They didn't. I tried calling both their phones. They didn't answer. I was a nervous wreck. I didn't know if they were hiding out, if they had already been arrested, or if they'd simply run away. Then, hours later, they came back. They were both very drunk. You're still awake? I thought you'd be asleep by now. How do you like the clothes? Did you see the news? We were at a bar, just hanging out. Why? What news? So I told them that I knew what they did, and I told them that one of the workers was critical because of them. Andrew didn't say anything. He just kept his head down. But Henry absolutely freaked out. He hadn't realized that the man had died. He started babbling. I couldn't understand what he was saying. Then he turned to Andrew and focused all his panic and anger on him. It's your fault. The tasers were your idea. You're the one who zapped him. You're the real monster. Henry dove at Andrew. I'd seen my brothers horse around before, but I'd never seen them actually fight. It was brutal. Henry pinned Andrew to the ground and punched him in the face. Andrew struggled to free himself, but he couldn't. So he pulled the taser out of his pocket and zapped Henry. Henry spazzed out and fell to the side, his head striking the edge of the coffee table. When he flopped onto the ground, he stopped moving. The shock of that moment sobered Andrew up. He crawled to our brother and shook his shoulders, but it was useless. Henry had a bloody gash on the side of his head, and his eyes were rolled back. Andrew's face was horrifyingly blank as he stood up, walked over our brother's dead body, and disappeared out the front door without saying a word. I checked to make sure Henry was dead. He was. Then I called 911 and tried to explain what happened. I was sobbing so hard that I don't think they understood me. But they sent someone anyway. 10 minutes later, the paramedics took Henry's body away, and an officer asked me for my statement. I told her everything as best as I could. It all happened so fast. Before I knew it, Henry's body was gone. The paramedics were gone. The policewoman was gone too, taking all my new clothes with her. This all happened a month ago. The police are still looking for Andrew. I promised to call them if he tried to contact me, but he hasn't. I also dropped out of school. My heart's not in it anymore. Besides, without my brothers, I need to work full-time to survive. This story is loosely inspired from a real-world event. On March 6, 2025, a bold daylight theft rattled Midtown Manhattan. Around 1:15 p.m., two shoplifters entered Bloomingdale's on 3rd Avenue and 59th Street, swiping over $6,500 worth of clothing. When store employees attempted to intervene, one suspect brandished a sparking taser, threatening to shock anyone who tried to stop them. The duo, both wearing hooded jackets and sunglasses, fled the scene with their stolen goods. No injuries were reported, but the act left employees shaken. Police later released surveillance images of the suspects and appealed to the public for help in identifying the two men behind the brazen theft.
It rained that morning like it had something to prove. Sharp, urgent needles of water that stabbed the tin roof of the brew shack like a thread. I'd been running the 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. shift at Java Junction for 6 months, long enough to know what kind of eyes watched you when your uniform was designed for tips. It was one of those roadside espresso kiosks, single window, single employee, all charm and show. My boss called it femme-forward branding. I called it a paycheck. I never minded the ogling. I'd mastered the art of eye contact without invitation. Men came and went. Construction foremen, graveyard techs, security guards pulling doubles. Most were harmless. Some tipped generously. One offered to pay my rent. Another asked if I'd pose for his espresso calendar. I laughed it all off. I was used to the game. Until that one shift. The shack sat alone off the interstate, tucked beside a 24-hour car wash that never opened before 9. The only light came from a busted halogen pole above the lot and the soft orange LED under the overhang. Beyond that, pure black, rain-slurred asphalt, and the glow of I-90 in the distance. It was isolated, which was exactly what creeped me out that morning. It started at 3:12. I was restocking the milk crates, phone charging behind the sink, music low, Billie Eilish whispering something sad into the speaker. I hadn't flipped the open sign yet. I was still in my hoodie, still invisible. Then came the buzz. Not the door chime, not a knock. A low, continuous hum. It was coming from the drive-through window. Someone had pulled their car just close enough to trigger the motion sensor floodlight above the stand, but hadn't turned off the engine. I glanced over my shoulder. A black SUV. Could have been anyone. I stepped toward the window, hoodie still up. No makeup yet, teeth unbrushed. Not exactly how we were supposed to greet customers, but I hadn't even brewed the first pot. Before I could slide open the window, the SUV rolled forward, engine revving low and slow like it was growling. Then it just idled. Right there, 10 feet away, no headlights. I stood frozen. You work the graveyard long enough, you learn the difference between early caffeine zombies and something else. This was something else. Eventually, it rolled out of sight. I didn't think much of it. I told myself it was a Lyft driver taking a nap or some hungover kid from the college nearby, but I locked the back door anyway. 3:39 a.m. I changed into uniform, did my usual routine. Mascara, lips, tied my hair into a high pony. The rain let up just a little, enough to hear the gravel shift when someone stepped on it. That's when I noticed it. Footprints, in the mud right outside the back door. Barefoot, human. I turned off the music. Nothing. Just the sound of my own breath. I went to the window again, cracked it open. My finger hovered over the open switch. I told myself if I saw anyone weird again, I'd call the boss, or 911. But the lot was empty, so I flipped the sign on. The first car was Eric, my usual 4 a.m. regular. Mid-30s, divorced, always tipped a 20, and always tried too hard. "Hey, you alright?" he asked. eyeing me as I handed over his Americano. Just didn't sleep much. He grinned. I could tire you out the right way. I smirked and said nothing. Same old Eric. Then came 418. The SUV returned. This time it parked, window down. Driver didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just stared. It was hard to make out his face, but I could see the collarbones. No shirt, just a dark jacket draped open. Skin pale like he hadn't been outside in weeks. "You serving?" he finally asked. His voice sounded like gravel soaked in vodka. "Yeah, what can I get you?" He leaned forward. "What's not on the menu?" Here we go again, I thought. "We've got a secret drink," I said, keeping it light. "It's called Go Back to Bed, double shot, no foam." He chuckled, then didn't speak again. Just watched me. "Look, if you're not ordering," I said. "Do you like being watched?" I paused. His eyes were darker than the glass around him, but glassy, bloodshot, like he hadn't blinked in hours. "I'm closing the window now," I said calm and flat. He didn't move, just whispered. "I liked it better before you put on the uniform." Then he drove away. I didn't report it or tell my boss. Honestly, I didn't want to give him another reason to lecture me about customer retention. But I did grab the box cutter and kept it on the shelf under the espresso machine. A 443, a Toyota pulled in. A woman this time, probably late 40s, looked tired. Soccer mom type, ordered 2 lattes, normal, human. Then came the third return. Same SUV. This time, it didn't approach the window. It parked in the far corner of the lot, lights off, no engine. I pretended not to see it, just kept working, trying to shake off the tight coil forming under my ribs. At 5:05, I took out the trash. I know, dumb move, but it was routine. And I told myself routine was safe. The dumpster sat 20 yards behind the shack. One overhead light flickered nearby. As I tossed the bag in, I heard something moving behind it. I turned. Nothing. Just rain pooling into the cracks of the lot. On my way back, I saw it. A cell phone, propped up against the back wall, recording. It was angled up toward the changing station inside. My stomach bottomed out. I kicked the phone as hard as I could into the bushes and sprinted inside. I locked both doors, killed the lights, and slid down the wall and sat there, holding my knees shaking. Not crying, just furious. Then I heard it again. The business phone was ringing. I got up and answered. "Java Junction," I said, voice cracking. Silence. Then, "We need to go on a long drive, babe. Come to my house and let Daddy play." "I wrote this for you, babe. Do you like it? No games. That's how Daddy likes it. I'm coming for you." I yanked the cord out of the wall. I didn't finish the shift. I left everything as it was, grabbed my things, and drove straight to the nearest gas station. I sat in the lot until the sun came up. I told my boss later that day I was quitting. I told him why. He asked if the customer had touched me. "No," I said. "Then maybe you're overreacting." He didn't even flinch. I never went back.
When I was 18, I spent my mornings at my grandfather's house. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I needed to. He'd been crumbling since Grandma passed. 3 months of silence. Grief tucked into every corner of the house they once filled with laughter. His home smelled of old wood, black coffee, and something faintly metallic, like the scent of a man who's been to war and lived too long afterward. Most mornings were quiet. I'd make us eggs while he slowly made it to the table, and we'd sit there, half listening to some rerun of The Price is Right. He rarely talked. When he did, it was mostly memories. Your grandma hated this show, he'd say with a slight smirk, but she'd watch it just to tease me. We never talked about death. It sat in the room with us anyway, like the third plate I still set out by habit. But June 7th was different. I walked in, and he was already standing at the door, like he was waiting, not hunched over or shivering in that threadbare robe. No, upright, his face lit like he had just seen God himself. "There's my boy!" he beamed. "Hey, Grandpa," I said cautiously, eyeing the oxygen tank still nestled by his recliner. He grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Guess what?" "What?" "I'm gonna go see my wife," he whispered, eyes misting over. "In 2 days." I laughed nervously, trying to gauge if he was joking. "What? Like, in a dream?" "No, I am going. 2 days." That's when I thought maybe he'd finally cracked. Maybe loneliness had unstitched the last bit of thread holding him together. He wouldn't elaborate, just smiled, settled into his chair, and asked me to put on Wheel of Fortune. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying it. 2 days. The next morning I returned. Same smile, same calm. He wasn't afraid. That's what scared me the most. People talk about death with dread, but him? He looked relieved. We spent the day watching TV, talking about Grandma. He told me how they met, at a high school sock hop in 1955. She was wearing red lipstick and chewing gum, and he tripped trying to ask her to dance. She laughed at him for years over that. "You think she'll be mad if I show up unshaven?" he asked. "I think she'll smack you either way," I joked. He chuckled and closed his eyes. "Good. I've missed being smacked by her." The next day, the second day, I arrived at 9 a.m. The house was quiet. No TV. No movement. I called out. No answer. I walked to his bedroom. He looked like he was sleeping, arms crossed over his chest. A small smile still stitched onto his face, like he'd left the world mid-laugh. I touched his wrist. Cold. My chest caved in. I dropped to my knees. He knew. That's what kept me up for weeks afterward. The way he said it. The peace he had. How he wasn't scared, wasn't in pain, just ready. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't coincidence. People think that kind of thing is just poetic hindsight. A narrative we build to make ourselves feel better. But I was there. I felt it. The doctors said it was heart failure, that he passed in his sleep. No suffering. But no diagnosis can explain that smile. I didn't cry at first. I just sat next to his bed, my fingers laced through his, the way I used to do when I was a kid scared of thunder. And then I looked up and whispered, "Tell her I said hi." This story has been inspired from a real experience shared by one of our Broccoli Fam subscribers. This is what they said. "When I was 18, my grandfather was struggling with heart issues. I visited him every morning. We'd talk, watch TV, and I'd help around the house. He'd been lonely since my grandmother passed 3 months earlier. On June 7th, I walked in to find him beaming. He said, 'Guess what? I'm going to see my wife in 2 days.' I thought he was just reminiscing. But exactly 2 days later, he passed away in his sleep. Calm, smiling, at peace. It still chills me. It was like he somehow knew." In college, I fell in love with 2 women, Ember and Isla. They were both beautiful, and I knew they'd do anything for me. Before graduation, I needed to make a choice. In a way, I felt a deeper connection with Isla. She made me laugh in a way that Ember never could. We were just more compatible. However, Ember was quite rich. In the end, I chose her. Isla did not take the news well. She was heartbroken. She cut us both out of her life and promised me that I'd regret my decision. Ember and I married soon after that, and for the next 10 years, I didn't regret my decision at all. Ember took over her family business, so I didn't need to work. I could just stay home, living the good life. Everything was easy. But with Ember at work all the time, I got a little lonely sometimes. A man has needs. So, about a year ago, I started fooling around with my next-door neighbor, Helen. She came over a couple times a week, always in the middle of the day when Ember was working. One day, Helen and I were playing in the living room when a strange woman appeared at our door. I could see her through the window, staring at us. I freaked out, worried that this was one of Ember's friends. Helen hurried out the back door while I went through the front to ask who this stranger was. She was a horrid woman, grossly overweight and very dirty. She looked like she could have been beautiful if she hadn't completely let herself go. "You're cheating on Ember?" She knew my wife's name. Panicked, I started making excuses for myself, telling her that she misinterpreted what she saw. She interrupted me, a look of disgust on her pimply face. "You don't remember me, do you?" I didn't. I would have remembered meeting such a gross person. She refused to introduce herself, forcing me to take a long look at her and figure it out myself. As I stared into her eyes, I was filled with shock. This was Isla. She used to be so youthful looking, so beautiful. "Isla? What happened to you?" That was definitely not the right thing to say. She shoved me backwards and barged inside. Then she flopped her fat body onto the couch and waited for me to join her. I did. "I'm not a hot, young thing anymore, Rowan. After you broke my heart, I could barely take care of myself. You made me into this." She waited for me to speak, but I didn't know what to say. I felt sorry for what she'd become, but I didn't feel guilty about it. People get dumped all the time. That doesn't mean they lose all sense of hygiene. When I didn't say anything, she started screaming. She said that I never should have married Ember. Worse, she said that she was going to tell her about my affair so that I'd lose her, too. That thought terrified me. I couldn't let this woman ruin my perfect marriage. I dropped down on my knees. "Please, you can't tell her. Is there anything I can do to change your mind?" A dark smile spread across her cold, sore-riddled lips. "The only way to stop me from telling Ember about your affair is if your affair is with me. Since you're already down there, why don't you put that pretty little mouth to use?" She wanted me to... Oh, no. I was disgusted. Based on her smell, I knew she didn't take care of her hygiene at all. I felt like throwing up. But I did what she asked. I had to. Afterwards, she left, and I took a long shower. I gargled mouthwash for like 20 minutes. Every day that week, she came back demanding the same thing. I always did what she asked, and I always felt horrible afterward. The fourth time she came back, I realized that she wasn't going to stop. She was using me, and she delighted in my obvious revulsion. I couldn't do this anymore. As she stood in front of me and demanded that I drop to my knees, I grabbed the lamp next to me and slammed it against her head. I didn't mean to kill her. I wasn't sure what I wanted to happen, but that one hit was all it took. She dropped to the ground with a grunt. I'd killed her. I was mostly in shock when I wrapped her in a blanket, dragged her body to my car, and dumped her in the reservoir. I tied her to a bunch of rocks so she'd sink to the bottom. She was so fat. LOL. Then I went back home, cleaned everything up, and pretended like nothing had happened. The police found her body 3 days later. Ember heard about it on the news. She came home in tears and told me everything. Even though Isla had been out of our lives for so long, Ember still felt terrible. Who could do something so horrible to a sweet, beautiful girl like Isla? Isla wasn't sweet, and she definitely wasn't beautiful anymore. I tried to comfort my wife, but I got tongue-tied. I think I finally felt guilty for what I'd done. I didn't feel anything when I disposed of her body. But now, all these negative feelings were hitting me all at once. Ember could see how upset I was. She hugged me and said, "It's okay. I'm sure the police will find her killer very soon. They always do." That was the worst thing she could have told me. Ember didn't go to work for the rest of the week. She could see how panicked and shaky I was, so she thought that I needed her support. She didn't know that her decision to stay home made everything harder for me. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't say anything. I was a nervous wreck. After days of this, she finally forced me to sit down and talk to her. She looked so loving and sympathetic. "Rowan, Isla's death has really affected you, and I think I know why. I'm going to ask you something, and you have to be completely honest with me, okay?" In that moment, I knew that she suspected me of the murder. There were no other explanations. I nervously waited for her question. "Honey, did you love her?" That made me laugh out loud. No, of course not. She was disgusting. She wasn't disgusting. She was beautiful and kind. Back then. But in the last 10 years, she got really gross. Ember's eyes narrowed in suspicion, and that's when I knew I blew it. I'd told her before that I hadn't seen Isla since college, and now she knew that was a lie. I tried to think of an explanation, but nothing came to mind. I stammered for a while, which made me look really guilty, until finally I told her the truth. I killed her. I dumped her body in the lake. My wife's face went completely blank. Then she gave me a dim, sad smile and pulled me into an embrace. "Don't worry. No one else has to know." Without saying anything else, she walked out of the house. I sat in silence for hours, replaying that conversation over and over in my head, until Ember came back with a wide smile on her face. She kissed me on the forehead and said that everything would be okay. Her company had close ties with the police department, and she paid them in both money and favors to declare Isla's death an accident. She basically helped me cover up a murder, with no words of judgment and no strings attached. I know I should be happy, but ever since that moment, I felt nothing but guilt and fear. Guilt for what I've done, and fear for what Ember will do next. I now know how deep her love goes, and how dark. This story is inspired from a real-life event. In March of 2025, a woman's body was discovered floating in the waters off Fort Totten in Queens, prompting an immediate investigation. A 911 call alerted authorities at around 11:15 a.m., and the NYPD Harbor unit swiftly brought the body ashore. Nearby, police located a car in a parking lot with blood on the driver's seat and a knife resting on the passenger side, potentially linked to the case. The woman's identity remained unknown, and the city medical examiner was tasked with determining the cause of death. The chilling discovery raised more questions than answers as the investigation continues. I was flying to Phoenix when the weirdest moment of my life happened. The plane was absolutely packed, and there were 2 separate crying babies in the back. It was just awful. And because I was on my way to my grandma's funeral, I already wasn't in the best mood. Right before we were about to take off, the seat next to me was still empty. I thought I lucked out, but literally seconds before they closed the doors, one final passenger came in. He was a short man with a bald head and an oversized business suit. He seemed normal from a distance, but as he got closer, I knew that there was something very wrong about him. He had streaks of sweat all over his wrinkled forehead, and his eyes kept darting around the cabin, like he was expecting someone to jump out and attack him. I know that some people are just naturally nervous when they fly, but this was different. He scared me. He plopped down in the seat next to me, hugged his briefcase to his chest, and stared forward. He didn't move. He didn't blink, not even to wipe the sweat from his eyes. A stewardess came over to tell him to put his briefcase under the seat. He ignored her. Please, sir, you have to put that away. He just clutched it tighter. Sir! He slowly turned his head, but he didn't look at her. He looked right at me. She's a demon. He waited for me to agree with him, but I just awkwardly looked out the window as if I didn't hear him. I mean, how was I supposed to respond to that? I guess he eventually gave in and put his briefcase under the seat. I wasn't looking. The stewardess left, and I just sat there, trying hard to ignore him. Even though I didn't look at him, I could feel him staring at me as the plane took off. About 20 minutes later, he started twitching in his seat. He scratched his arms and shifted around like he was on fire. I had to say something now. I got the distinct feeling that he was on some kind of substance. Are you okay? He squeezed his eyes closed and rocked back and forth. The demons, they followed me here. I pressed the stewardess call button. I could see one of the flight attendants on the other side of the plane. She looked over and gave me one of those "I'll be there in a minute" looks. The man dug nervously under his shirt until he pulled out a rosary. He squeezed the beads in his hand and whispered a frantic prayer. The stewardess still wasn't coming over. She was busy talking and laughing with another passenger. I waved at her again. Suddenly, the man stopped praying. He raised the beads to his lips, kissed them, and slowly pushed the entire rosary into his mouth. "What are you doing? Excuse me, ma'am, please!" The stewardess rolled her eyes, obviously thinking I was a difficult passenger, and slowly walked over. The man swallowed the whole rosary. I stared at him, waiting for him to choke. He didn't. He just started whispering again. "Stay away, demons. You can't hurt me. Demons. Demons." When the stewardess finally reached us, her anger at me disappeared. She could see that this guy was really messed up. "Sir, what's wrong?" He grabbed her uniform and pulled her inches away from his face. Then he screamed, "You're all demons!" He let go and she stumbled backwards. Confused, she ran off, probably to get help from her coworkers. That didn't help me, though. I was stuck next to a crazy person. Demons, demons, demons. I scooted as far away as I could, but I didn't have much room in the window seat. Then, he stopped whispering and once again turned toward me. "I know you're not a demon like everyone else. I can trust you, right?" I nodded. He asked me if I had a pen. I guess he wanted to write a message or something. I had one in my pocket, and of course I gave it to him. You can't say no to someone like that. He took the pen and squeezed it tightly, but he wasn't writing anything down. He was just tapping it frantically against the back of the seat in front of him. The stewardess came back and announced that the pilot had asked him to leave. She seemed really nervous to be delivering the bad news, and I didn't understand why the pilot didn't talk to this guy himself. The man stood, his eyes wide and crazy, and he started gasping. Demon, you're stealing my breath. I watched in horror as he attacked that poor woman with the pen. I'd just handed him a weapon and I didn't even know it. He swiped it through the air and jabbed it into her arm. She pulled back and he swiped it again. He didn't seem too strong, though. He really was gasping for air. He kept sputtering out the word demons, waving that pen around like a total lunatic, until he crumbled onto the floor. It didn't take me long to realize what had happened. The rosary that he'd swallowed was still lodged in his throat. He couldn't breathe. As he clutched at his neck and made the most horrible gasping sounds, I jumped out of my seat and crouched over him. "What are you doing?" I didn't have time to explain that I was a nurse. I pulled the pen out of his hand and used it to give the man a tracheotomy. Thanks to my quick thinking, I saved his life. When the airport paramedics arrived, he was stable. They wheeled him off the plane. While he was on the stretcher, he weakly turned his head toward me. He couldn't speak, but he mouthed out a single word. I think he said, "Angel." I'll never know what this guy's deal was or what caused his episode. It was the craziest flight of my life. This story is loosely inspired from a real-life incident. A 31-year-old passenger on American Airlines, operated by Envoy Air from Savannah to Miami, was returning to Savannah after less than a minute in the air due to a terrifying mid-flight episode. Shortly after takeoff, the man began stomping, shaking, and incoherently yelling, causing crew to initially think that he was having a seizure. Believing, and I'm quoting, demons followed him onto the plane, he shouted about spiritual warfare, urging his sister to pray and to, quote, close her eyes. My first semester of college began with a roommate who spoke to ghosts. She introduced herself on move-in day as Lisa. She shoved her suitcase onto the shared bed frame and plopped a glass jar filled with dead flowers on her desk. That first night, I heard her whispering. At first, I thought she was on the phone. But when I turned my head, I saw her sitting cross-legged on the floor, hands in her lap, staring into the dark corner near the closet. "They miss the way the air smelled before they drowned," she murmured. "They say the river was cold but calm, peaceful." I froze under my blanket. I was 18, newly out, still figuring myself out. I didn't need this. The next morning, I asked, gently, "Were you talking to someone last night?" Lisa smiled. "Yeah, they don't like silence." She said they were her friends, dead ones. One had hung himself in a barn, another overdosed on painkillers, a third drowned during a lake party in junior year. She said they visited her often, protected her, talked to her. At first I thought she was messing with me, but she told everyone, loudly, casually, like it was a hobby. Our RA, our floor mates, everyone heard her tell these stories like they were bedtime tales. She wasn't just strange, she was magnetic. People fell into her orbit and didn't notice when she pulled their teeth out with pliers. A few weeks in, Lisa announced she was engaged, showed us the ring, a thin silver band with a tiny opal, said her fiancé was moving to the city next year, said he wrote her letters, said he understood the dead spoke to her and still loved her. Then came Jack, a guy from our brother house, dark hair, high cheekbones, always smelling like leather and weed. She brought him over twice before they started studying in her bunk behind the curtain. The walls were thin. By week 6, Jack was sleeping over every other night. I confronted her in the kitchen once while she let tomato sauce crust onto a pan that she had abandoned 3 days earlier. "You said you were engaged." "I am," she shrugged. "But Jack gets me in other ways." "You told your fiancé you were faithful." "Yeah, well, people lie." She said it like it was a recipe. Mix 1 part omission, 2 parts denial, a dash of sex, and stir until delusional. I wasn't the only one disgusted. Our other housemates, Kara and Melissa, started watching her, listening, documenting. It wasn't hard to find evidence. Elle had no filter. She talked about her affair like she was narrating a steamy soap opera. Sometimes she'd brag about making Jack cry, said he begged her to break it off with her fiancé. We weren't saints. We'd all done things we weren't proud of. But Lisa was different. She loved the chaos, breathed it in like oxygen. We emailed her fiancé. No threats, no screenshots, just a short note. "She's cheating. His name is Jack. You deserve better." The response came 3 days later. He showed up at our front door, middle of the afternoon. "Is Lisa home?" he asked, voice even. "Back room," Kara said. Her eyes didn't leave the book in her hand. He knocked. Lisa opened the door. "Hey, babe," she chirped, pulling him in. "I missed you." He walked past her without a word and entered her room. Jack was there. 10 seconds later, a shout. "You lying piece of shit!" The door flew open. Her fiancé lunged at Jack, grabbed him by the collar. "You touched her?" "She said you were abusive, man." "I what?" I rushed to the hallway with Melissa. She had her phone out, recording, just in case. No one stepped in. Not yet. Lisa appeared in the doorframe, feigning shock. "Stop! You're scaring me!" That's when we stepped in. "Everyone calm down," I said. Her fiancé dropped his grip, breathing hard. "She said I threatened to kill her if she left, that I stalked her. I moved cities to help her with school." "She told us you hit her," I said. He stared at us, wide-eyed. "She's never even seen me raise my voice." We watched him leave. Watched Lisa stand in the hallway 5 minutes later, crying for a crowd. "He tried to hit me," she sobbed. "He came to hurt me." "No, he didn't," Melissa snapped. "We were right there." Lisa's face shifted, just slightly, like someone flipping a switch. Then she doubled down. "I told you he was dangerous. Why else do you think I needed Jack?" We didn't believe her. Not anymore. That night we agreed she had to go. What we didn't know was how far she'd go to stay. 2 days later, Jack showed up with a black eye and a police report. "She attacked me," he said, voice trembling. "She said I was ruining her life. Said if I didn't lie and say the fiancé hit her, she'd accuse me." Melissa crossed her arms. "So now you're the victim." Jack shook his head. "She's not well. She talks to the coroners, tells them secrets. She thinks she's a medium or something." He moved out of his house a week later. Then the real mess began. Lisa started leaving knives on the kitchen counter, serrated ones, pointed toward the hallway. She put lipstick all over the bathroom mirror in what looked like writing, but backwards, illegible. We never caught her doing it. Then someone stole Melissa's necklace, a silver chain from her grandmother. We all denied it, but Lisa had taken to wearing turtlenecks, even in 80-degree weather. Melissa's mattress got sliced too. My shampoo was replaced with bleach. And on my desk one morning was a dead rose, freshly dead, with a single word written in ballpoint on a napkin. "Listen." We couldn't prove it was her, but we knew. We took it to housing. 3 days later, they relocated her. Not expelled, just moved to another dorm on the opposite side of campus. We thought we were free. But that weekend, I woke up with the scent of smoke in my nose. Not fire, incense. My eyes burned. My window was open. On the floor was a matchbook, from a place in town none of us had been. I recognized the writing inside. Her slanted, angry cursive. Just 2 words. "I remember." We never heard from her again after that semester. Rumor was she dropped out. Another rumor said she started a fire in her new dorm and blamed it on a student who was out of town. I don't know what was real anymore. Sometimes I wonder if she really could talk to the dead. This story is inspired from a real-life incident shared by one of our subscribers. This is what they said. "In my first semester, I had a roommate, let's call her S, who believed she could see and talk to the ghosts of her dead friends. She shared vivid stories about them with all of us, and she wasn't joking. On top of that, she was engaged but started hooking up with a guy from a nearby house. We tipped off her fiancé, who caught them together. She denied everything, then claimed he was abusive. Though we all heard the argument, and he never even raised his voice. Living with her was chaos. She'd never cleaned, left stuff everywhere, and always blamed others for the mess. S was something else."
I worked the bar at a cafe on 6th and Burnside. Good coffee, clean tables, decent music. It also happened to be dead center between 3 homeless shelters. So when a redheaded guy in a torn army jacket sat down in our lounge area and started whispering to himself, I didn't bat an eye. At first. His lips moved fast, like he was reciting scripture at double speed. Then his hands started twitching, slow at first, fingers curling, forming strange shapes like he was pulling puppet strings out of the air. His eyes were locked on the floor, and I thought, okay, maybe schizophrenia. Harmless enough. Then out of nowhere, he stood up and screamed, loud, sharp. Every customer in the place froze mid-bite or mid-sip. I came around the bar. "Hey man, you need to leave," I said, keeping my tone even. He turned, blue eyes, cracked lips, maybe 20, 22 at most. His pupils were blown out, but his focus was razor sharp, locked on me. "This is all a giant game. I'll fucking kill you with one finger." It should have scared me more, but when you've worked long enough in a place like this, you collect death threats like coffee stamps. "Cool story," I said. "Time to go." He walked out with no resistance, but his eyes didn't break from mine. Not once. We closed at 9. By then the streets are wet, shimmering black under the sodium lights. Winter in this city is like being inside a freezer full of cigarette smoke and old secrets. I parked 6 blocks away. Cheaper, less hassle, usually not a big deal. But that night felt off. About a block into my walk, I heard a hissing, like a slow leak in a tire, or someone whispering through their teeth. I stopped and looked behind me. Nothing. Then I heard footsteps, fast, crunching in the snow. I took off, not waiting to see who or what it was. The garage came into view and I flew through the door, choosing the stairs over the elevator. Always choose the stairs when you're being followed. Halfway up, I heard the ground floor door slam shut behind me. I didn't look. I reached my car, flung the door open, and locked it before I even sat down. My breath fogged up the windshield. My hands were shaking. That's when I saw him. The redhead, same army jacket, but now he was seething. His mouth twisted into something animal, hands clenched like claws. He screamed when he saw me. "I'm going to fucking kill you!" He charged at the car, slamming his fists into the window. I didn't think. I threw the door open into his chest, knocking him off balance, and then I floored it. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called the cops. They said they'd look into it. A few hours later, I got a call back. They found him, said he was known to them, said he claimed to be a demigod. I'm not even kidding. They let him go. No charges, no holds. They just let him go. Something about mental health holds being full and him not being a direct threat at the time. I didn't tell my coworkers. I didn't want to hear the usual, "man, that's wild" reactions. I just worked my shift, eyes constantly flicking to the windows. A few days passed. No redhead. I started to think maybe he wandered off to some other block to terrorize. But then things started happening. Small at first. Weird symbols drawn in chalk near the back door. A dead crow on the dumpster lid. The manager's tire slashed. She thought it was her ex, but I wasn't so sure. Then one night, I came home to find my apartment door cracked open. I live alone. I stepped inside slow, heart thudding. Nothing looked taken, nothing looked moved, except for the kitchen. A single item sat on my counter. A finger, mummified, charred, wrapped in a string of prayer beads. I didn't call the cops. I didn't even touch it. I just stood there for a long time, staring. Then I dumped the entire thing, cutting board and all, into a trash bag. Then I walked it straight into the incinerator chute at the end of the hallway. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, the cafe was quiet, too quiet. The espresso machine kept glitching. Customers trickled in slowly. And then, he came back, just walked in, smiling. His hair was slicked back, eyes calm now, like he'd had a reset of some sort. I froze mid-pour. My coworker Charlie didn't know the history, so he greeted him like anyone else. "Hey there, what can I get started for you?" The redhead smiled. "Something bitter." I locked myself in the walk-in freezer and called my manager. I told her everything. She told me to go home and take care of my mental health. Said I looked spooked. By the time I came out, he was gone, but his coffee was untouched on the counter, and inside it, a single metal washer. No explanation, just sitting there, gleaming in the foam. That night, I didn't go home. I booked a room at a shitty motel out by the interstate. Figured if I changed locations, I'd throw him off. I didn't even use my card. Paid in cash. Slept with a kitchen knife on the nightstand. And yet I still dreamed of him. In the dream, I was tied to a chair in the cafe, and he was behind the bar, pouring hot espresso over my feet, humming softly. Every time I tried to speak, he'd raise one finger, just one, and I'd go silent. When I woke up, my shoes were wet, but I hadn't left the bed. I quit the next morning. I told the manager I was done, that I couldn't deal with the crazy anymore. She was understanding, or maybe just relieved. Maybe she thought I was the one who was crazy. This story is inspired from a real-life incident which happened with one of our subscribers. This is what they said. I work at a downtown cafe near some shelters, so weird encounters happen. One day, a redhead guy in his 20s walks in, muttering and acting like he's casting spells. Then he starts yelling. I tell him to leave, and he looks me dead in the eye and says, "This is all a game. I'll kill you with one finger." I shrug it off. Just another day. That night, walking to my car in the dark, I hear hissing, then fast footsteps behind me. I sprint to the garage stairwell. Just as I get in my car, he appears, furious, screaming and pounding on my windows. I door checked him and sped off. Next day, cops picked him up. He claimed God and stuff and admitted everything. Got a short sentence. I got a restraining order. Never saw him again.
My first job was working at McDonald's in a pretty sketchy part of the city. We got all kinds of customers, and because I usually worked the late shift, I had to deal with some pretty odd people. I'm a bigger guy, and even though I was 17 at the time, I looked a lot older. I always felt like I could take care of myself. One night, a really thin, poor-looking woman came in. The restaurant was otherwise empty, and my coworker was on her smoke break, so it was just the two of us in the building. She smiled at me, and she seemed pleasant. "Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get you, ma'am?" She asked for a coffee. That's it. Easy enough. I got that for her. She paid, and I told her to have a nice day. "Have a nice day?" She acted like I'd just insulted her or something. With pure rage, she splashed her scalding hot coffee at me. It got all over my shirt. My stomach was pretty burned, so I tugged on the fabric to separate it from my skin. "Serves you right." I'm usually not an angry person. In fact, a lot of people call me a gentle giant because I'm so soft-spoken for such a big guy. But in that moment, I was furious. I jumped over the counter and chased her outside. She was waiting for me. I didn't touch her or anything, but I got close enough to be intimidating. I asked her why she'd attacked me like that, and she just started laughing. Then she backed away into the street. Thankfully, there were no cars coming, and she started to dance like a ballerina. I couldn't tell if she was taunting me, or if she was so crazy that she had no idea what was happening. My coworker, Jake, joined me on the sidewalk. He asked me what was going on, and I just shrugged. By then, my anger was gone. I was mostly confused. "Have a nice day, my ass." And she disappeared behind a building. A couple of weeks passed. I didn't forget about the incident, but it kind of faded from my mind. Then, one night, I was in the kitchen cleaning out the fry machine. Jake was manning the front. I heard the door open, and I heard him greet another customer. I couldn't see who it was, so I didn't know that the lady had come back. A few minutes later, I heard Jake say, "Have a nice day." Then I heard the woman's voice. "How dare you!" I rushed to the front, but it was too late. Poor Jake was screaming and holding his face. The woman had splashed hot coffee directly into his face. She looked at me, did a curtsy, and skipped out of the building. I couldn't let her get away with this again. Jake looked seriously hurt. I raced after her, grabbed her in the parking lot, and held her hands behind her back. She was very frail, so I made sure not to hurt her, just to keep her in place. She kept struggling and snapping her teeth at me, but I wouldn't let go. As I pulled her back inside, she snapped her teeth a bit too hard, and her dentures flopped out of her mouth. "Call the police, please." Jake made the call. His face was bright red. I couldn't tell if the burns were serious enough to leave scars, but he definitely looked like he was in pain. As we waited for the police to come, I asked the lady what her problem was. Why did she freak out whenever someone told her to have a nice day? I'll always remember her answer.
"I don't like when people tell me what to do."
An ambulance came to take Jake to the hospital, and a policeman put the lady in handcuffs. Another officer grabbed her fallen dentures. I had to give my statement. Pretty soon, everyone was gone, and I was alone in the building. I was really unnerved. I worried about Jake, and I couldn't stop picturing that lady's toothless face as she stared at me while the cops took her away. I knew she needed help, and I should have felt sympathy for her, but I just couldn't. I found out the next day that Jake was going to get skin grafts. The burns were really bad. Plus, one of his eyes was messed up. The doctor said he would lose some of his vision. After I visited him at the hospital, I went to the police station to find out what had happened to the lady. I had to talk to like 5 different people before I got an answer. I found out her name was Cynthia. They'd already let her go. Her son posted bail, so she was back home awaiting her trial. I couldn't believe it. She was violent. She needed to stay locked up. I was told that I would be called in to testify at her trial, but otherwise there was nothing I could do. For the rest of the week, I kept checking in on Jake. He was doing better. He wasn't in as much pain, but he was really upset about the damage to his eye. I felt terrible. I still had to go to work, though. I did 4 more shifts that week, constantly on edge. I had this dark feeling that Cynthia would come back. All my coworkers knew what happened, so we were prepared in case anyone saw her. That Friday night, I saw her again. She didn't enter the building. She was just standing outside the window, looking right at me and dancing. I called the police, and the dispatcher said that they'd get there in a couple of minutes. Cynthia never entered. She just kept staring and dancing. It looked like she was laughing, too, though I couldn't hear her through the window. Then, she opened the door, stuck her head inside, and shouted,
"Have a nice day."
The police got there 1 minute later, but she was already gone. Jake ended up getting a bunch of money from the owner. He moved away. Cynthia got 6 months of probation. That's it. I didn't learn until the trial that she's the mother of our mayor. Thankfully, I haven't seen her again, but I still think about her a lot. What a psychopath. This story is loosely inspired from one of our subscribers. During her time at a fast food chain, she faced 2 disturbing incidents. In one case, a milkshake machine malfunctioned, and when a customer was shown how runny his shake turned out, he lost his temper and threw it at her, drenching her in chocolate. Yet, she was still expected to serve him. On another winter day, a homeless man entered, used the restroom, and politely paid for coffee. She gave it to him for free with a kind word, which unexpectedly triggered him to throw the hot drink at her. When he refused to leave, she had to involve the police. Wendy was my high school girlfriend. She was smart and nice, but I always knew that our relationship was temporary. Graduation was coming up, and she had all these big plans about going to one of the state colleges in California. That had always been her dream. I knew I'd never get accepted to one of those. I was just going to stay in Arizona and probably take classes at the community college. I didn't want to hold her back, so I figured that we'd go our separate ways. I even told her that. She understood. She knew that her dreams were more important than our relationship. To make her happy, though, I applied to all the same colleges she did, just in case. One day, I got home from school to find a stack of mail waiting for me. They were acceptance letters. I'd gotten into all 3 of Wendy's top schools. I couldn't believe it. I literally danced around the house in celebration before I called her to deliver the good news. When she answered the phone, I could tell she was crying. I got rejected everywhere. She was so upset that I couldn't tell her my good news. Instead, I stashed my acceptance letters in a drawer and asked if she wanted to come over and talk about it. When she showed up, she was an absolute wreck. Blotchy eyes, mascara down her face. She didn't even wipe the snot off her nose. I comforted her, like a good boyfriend, and told her that she'd be okay. She explained that she was so confident that she'd get accepted that she hadn't applied anywhere else. She thought her life was ruined. It took a while for me to calm her down. And when she finally did, she got this sad smile on her face. At least now we'll still be together. I couldn't hide my news anymore. I told her that I'd gotten accepted to all her dream colleges. I didn't know which one I was going to pick, but I was definitely going to go. Probably UCLA. That one had the best journalism program. She didn't say anything. Her face went completely blank. She stood up, wiped her eyes, and walked out of my house as if I wasn't there. She needed time to process her feelings, I guess. My parents came home a bit later, and I told them the good news. Dad happily agreed to pay for whatever wasn't covered by my scholarship. We had a celebration dinner and everything. I felt so freaking proud of myself. And for the rest of the evening, I didn't think about Wendy. Late that night, after I'd already gone to sleep, Wendy called me. Hello? You can't go! We argued for a while, and I reminded her that if the tables had been turned, I would have supported her move to California. It wasn't fair that she wanted me to pass up the opportunity. She got really whiny, saying that I was ruining her life. She accused me of taking her spot, even though we'd applied for completely different programs. No matter what I said, she kept repeating that she wouldn't let me go. It was my duty to stay here with her. I know it sounds harsh, but after an hour of listening to her whine into the phone, I finally had enough. I broke up with her and ended the call. When I went to school the next day, I absolutely dreaded seeing her again. I hoped she would avoid me, but nope. She was waiting for me in the parking lot, like she usually did. She walked over, a big smile on her face, and kissed me as if nothing had happened. What are you doing? Just taking care of my boyfriend. I was too weirded out to confront her, so I forced a smile and we walked into the school together. For the rest of the day, she was in a great mood, making jokes, chatting with friends, acting super affectionate. It felt like she was trying too hard. At lunch, I told our friends about my plans to go to UCLA. They were all really excited for me. Wendy started acting really manic. I got accepted too! We've decided to live off campus in a cute little apartment! What are you talking about? She forced a laugh and then very quickly changed the subject. This kind of behavior lasted for days. She kept telling people about non-existent plans we made for the future. Buying a new car, enrolling in the same classes, sharing a meal plan. It was just so weird. And whenever I confronted her about it, she'd start laughing and change the subject. I was really starting to think she'd lost it. I was so concerned that I called her mom. She knew about Wendy's rejection letters, but I guess Wendy told her that we were both planning to stay in town and take community college classes together. I had to level with her. I explained that I was going to California. I even said that Wendy and I had broken up, but she kept acting like we hadn't. Her mom didn't say anything for a long time. Then, she screamed into the phone, "You bastard! You stole her spot!" Wow. Her mom was just as crazy as her. I decided then and there that I needed to stay as far away from Wendy as possible. That evening, I stayed up in my room, calling the UCLA admissions office and officially accepting the offer. The lady was super nice and answered all my questions. She said that she was really impressed by my personal statement. I felt a little guilty because Wendy had actually written my personal statement for me. I didn't tell her that, though. Hours later, Mom called me downstairs for dinner. She was in the kitchen, but Wendy was sitting at the table, a big smile on her face. Mom didn't know how Wendy had been acting the last few days. Hi, honey. I know it's rude, but I told her to leave. Not until I tell you my new idea. You're gonna love it. She stood up, pulled an electric razor from her pocket, and started shaving her head. Her long, blonde hair fell in clumps onto the dinner table. Since you never wanted to go to UCLA and they accepted you by mistake, then I'm going to take your spot. Don't you see? I'll pretend to be you. They'll never know. That's when my mom walked in with a platter of food. She dropped it onto the floor completely in shock. Wendy turned to her with crazy eyes. Hi, Mom! I literally had to pull her out of the house. She didn't show up to school after that. No one knew what happened to her. Her mom won't answer my questions. I'm just worried that when I arrive on campus in a couple months that I'll see her there pretending to be me. This story is loosely inspired from a real-life experience of one of our Broccoli Fam subscribers. This is what he said. Back in high school, I dated a girl for a few months. When I got into my dream college, the one I'd wanted since I was a kid, I was thrilled and went to share the news with her. A couple of weeks later, she told me that she'd been rejected from every college except the local community one, despite taking AP and language classes. Then, she said we should move to Florida to live with her grandma and apply to schools there. I told her I wasn't ready to relocate after just a few months of dating. That's when she gave me an ultimatum. Her or my dream school.
My tooth hurt. I had toothaches before, but they always went away. This time was different. It started throbbing weeks ago, and it only got worse. I was supposed to meet my friend Isla for brunch, but I called her to cancel. I was in too much pain. Over the phone, I told her the truth. You have to see a dentist. I know you don't want to, but you need to go. I can drive you if you want. I knew Isla was right. Even though I was terrified of dentists, I couldn't live with the pain anymore. Since I didn't have a dentist myself, I asked Isla to book me an appointment at her dental office. She was happy to oblige, and even happier to tell me her dentist was free this afternoon. 2 hours later, I was in the dental office, filling out a form and trying to act brave. Isla held my hand, just to remind me that I wasn't alone. The receptionist took my information and told me to take a seat. I didn't have a chance before the dentist himself walked into the waiting room and led me into one of the back rooms. He told me to sit in the reclining chair and explain how I felt. After I explained everything, he made me open my mouth so he could take a look. He identified the problem of the toothache right away, assuring me he could take away the pain. All I needed was a cavity filled, and it wouldn't take too long. And it didn't. Despite all my fears, the procedure itself was painless. It lasted for less than 20 minutes and all the pain was gone. Since it's your first time here, this is free of charge. Just be careful with that tooth, okay? I will charge you for any returning visits. Shocked at my good luck, I thanked him and headed back into the waiting room. I didn't understand how a business could make any money if they didn't charge customers, but my only explanation was that he wanted my repeat business. Isla led me back to her car. To celebrate my first visit to the dentist in years, she offered to take me to Swayze's, our favorite bar. I knew that I shouldn't be drinking alcohol right now, but I didn't argue. Even though I was an adult, I couldn't skip out on celebrating. I conquered my fears and was finally willing to come back for more visits, only if necessary, of course. Isla treated me to mimosas. She drank a pina colada herself. We were talking and laughing when an old woman came to our table. What are you looking at? I wasn't looking at anyone. At least not her. It sounded like she wanted to fight. I tried to defuse the situation and told her that I just had dental work done, so I might be woozy from the medicine. That's why I was probably staring. She didn't seem to care. She pulled back her fist and punched me in the cheek. My mouth filled with blood, and my tooth was throbbing again. I swirled my tongue around, feeling shards of something. I spat them out, revealing pieces of my wounded tooth, I hadn't expected my tooth to break into pieces, but now that it had, I wasn't afraid anymore. All I needed to do was go back to the dentist's office and explain the situation. Once again, Isla went with me. The dentist took one look at me and brought me back into the same operating room. "You know, I'm going to charge you this time, right?" I nodded. He got work on the jagged stump that used to be my tooth, and this time it was much less pleasant than the first. I really felt him digging around. He saddled down my tooth and added a cap. I knew this would be expensive, but at least it took the pain away. He was almost done when I noticed his family photos on the counter. One of the framed pictures showed him and his mother. It was the lady from the bar, the one who punched me. I could have interpreted the events in a dozen ways, but I know that this is somehow connected, and definitely a setup. My dentist's mom wanted to ensure that I returned to the dental office and paid my full share. "Who's that?" The doctor smiled before flipping the photo onto its face. Then he finished on my mouth and told me to go back to the front desk to pay. The second visit cost me $700. I knew it wasn't fair, but I paid anyway. When I went back to Isla, she seemed concerned by my expression. I told her what I'd discovered, and she was even angrier than I was. She suggested that we go back to the bar and confront the old woman. I really didn't want to. I'd rather just go home and take a nap. But when Isla gets like this, there's nothing you can do. So I followed her to the car to take me back to the bar. The old lady was playing pool by herself. She looked surprised to see us so soon. "I know why you punched me." She just laughed. "My son's got to make a living somehow. I'm tired of all the freebies." The way she said it made it seem like her son had no idea what she was doing to ensure her repeat customers. He was a legit business, while his mother was violent and awful. Isla waited for me to do something, but I had no idea what. I didn't want to fight an old woman. I looked at the pool table. She seemed to be really good at billiards, and I was too. "I'll play you. If you win, you'll reimburse me for the dental visit. But if you lose, I promise to get a cleaning every 3 months." She agreed, racked up the balls, and said that she was ready to break. "Young people like you can't appreciate your teeth while you still have them. It's not fair." I played dumb and asked what she meant. She reached into her mouth and pulled out a pair of dentures. I was surprised she had those. They seemed so natural in her mouth. Before we'd started a pool game, Isla rushed forward, grabbed the dentures out of the woman's hand, and raced for the door. "Run!" It was such a weird visual. Seeing Isla hold up fake teeth as she ran through the crowd of barflies. I took one last look at the toothless woman, and then followed Isla outside. It was a small victory, but it felt great. This story is inspired from a real-world incident. On December 25th, 2019, an unusual Christmas assault occurred in Avondale, a Cincinnati neighborhood. Henrietta Bush, 32, allegedly attacked Rhonda Lewis after she wished her a simple Merry Christmas. Police reported that Bush repeatedly punched Lewis in the head, leaving her with visible injuries. Bush was arrested on a misdemeanor assault charge and held in Hamilton County Jail on a $10,000 bond, awaiting her January 9th court appearance. Records revealed Bush's extensive criminal history, including arrests for theft, assault, narcotics, and probation violations. This violent outburst added yet another chapter to her troubling record of repeated offenses.
I was walking around the mall, enjoying my day, when I noticed a cute girl staring at me from the food court. She clearly seemed interested, and since I was single again, I walked over. I introduced myself. No icebreaker, just my name. She seemed to like my directness. She said her name was Christy, and she was a professional singer. I didn't believe that, but whatever. She seemed cute. So we had lunch together and exchanged numbers. I promised I'd call her. Not if I call you first. Oh, yeah, totally. I went home after that. And literally 20 minutes later, I'm not joking, she texted me, "I miss you already." I didn't respond. A few minutes later, she sent me that emoji of a dancing woman in a red dress. Like, what does that even mean? 3 more rapid-fire texts later, and I realized that this chick was crazy. I didn't answer her. And eventually, she stopped texting. The next day, I went into work at Jamba Juice. And guess who came in as a customer? Yep, Christy. "Wow, I didn't know you worked here." She did. I told her yesterday. I asked her what she wanted to order, and she said she wanted me to surprise her. Then, as I was getting her drink, she asked if I wanted to hear her sing. I did not. I told her that directly. This was my place of work. There were other customers here. But she thought I was joking, so right in the middle of the room, she started belting out a song. I'm pretty sure it was from a musical because it sounded pretty Broadway, but I didn't recognize it. Maybe if she was a real singer, I'd be able to recognize the melody. She was awful. I tried to get her to stop. The other customers were squirming in their seats, and I felt so embarrassed for her. "I'll only stop singing if you go out with me tonight." I took her outside so we could talk privately. "I'm sorry, Christy, but I don't think we're a good match. I hope you understand." Once again, I was very direct with her. I knew that if I gave in just once, then she'd never leave me alone again. She nodded sadly and told me that she understood. Then she backed away, finishing her song as she went. Honestly, I was surprised that I got rid of her that easily. Crazy chicks usually can't take rejection without throwing a fit. I felt like I dodged a bullet. I went back inside and finished my shift. That night, I had a couple friends over to watch MMA. I told them all about Christie's musical number. They thought it was hilarious. We were all laughing about it, having a good time, when my buddy Jake got really quiet. His eyes were wide, and he was staring at the window. I followed his gaze. And there was Christy, in my backyard, peering into the house like a raccoon. When she saw me looking, she smiled and waved, as if she wasn't trespassing on my property. "Aren't you going to invite her in, dude? We'd love to meet the new girlfriend." I had to stop this right now. I walked outside to confront her. I told her that she was scaring me and I didn't want her wandering around my yard. She smiled and handed me a flower that she'd picked from my garden. "I don't want to see you again. Do you understand?" "Yes, I totally understand. Goodbye." She did a little bow and then disappeared into the night. When I got back inside, all my buddies were bursting with laughter. I didn't think it was funny, though. I thought there was something very wrong with her, and there was no doubt in my mind that she'd come back. For the next week, she kept her distance. I was starting to think that she'd finally gotten the hint. And then, on Sunday, I went to visit my grandma. I try to see her once a month. Grandma was sitting in the courtyard outside the retirement home eating an apple. We hugged, and as always, she told me that I needed to eat more. I was just too skinny. Then she said something that really alarmed me. "Maybe your new girlfriend can start cooking for you." I told her I didn't have a girlfriend. And she said that my girlfriend came to visit her yesterday. She described exactly what Christy looked like, and mentioned that she even sang her a song. "She's not a very good singer, though." I stepped to the edge of the courtyard so that Grandma couldn't hear me. Then I called Christy and told her that if she didn't leave me alone, I was going to call the police. I really laid into her. I was a lot meaner than I usually am with people, but I had to be. There was no other way to talk to this woman. She started crying, and I hung up. That was the last time I talked to her for a month, but I swear I saw her since then, hiding in crowds, watching me through windows, following me in her car. I was getting really paranoid, until, finally, when I noticed her shoe prints in the mud outside my bedroom window, I finally gave up. I called her and said we could go on one real date. I'd give her one chance. And afterwards, if it didn't work out, she had to swear she'd leave me alone. So I took her out to an Italian restaurant. And to my surprise, she was on her best behavior. No singing, no inappropriate jokes or plans for the future. Just a nice meal and a normal conversation. When we were finished and I paid the bill, she looked me right in the eyes and said, "You know, I don't think this is working anymore. Take care." This story is loosely inspired by the real-world experience of one of our subscribers. This is what he said. Back in school, a girl came up behind me and complimented my shirt, even though I was wearing a jacket. She seemed nervous, but sweet, and we exchanged numbers later that day. Within 30 minutes of texting, she asked me to be her boyfriend. I said yes, not thinking much of it. But things turned weird fast. She started sending singing videos and constantly asking, "Do you think I'm cute?" and "Do you love me?" It felt off, so I ended things less than an hour in. She took it okay. Later, I found out she'd been asking out lots of guys, and once word spread, everyone backed off. Eventually, she moved away and had a serious breakdown, walking into traffic. She survived, but clearly she was dealing with a lot.
There are few moments in your life that tattoo themselves into your nervous system. That Tuesday night in October was one of mine. We were 3 weeks into the semester, and my new roommate Daniel still hadn't fully unpacked. I chalked it up to artistic temperament. He was majoring in visual media, and had that jittery, distracted energy of someone always editing a film in their head. The kind of guy who ate Hot Pockets with chopsticks and taped tinfoil to the windows because the light was too synthetic. Weird, sure, but in LA, weird is the air you breathe. The first red flag was when I caught him unplugging my monitor while I was in the middle of editing. He didn't even flinch. "Just checking for listening devices," he muttered. I laughed, assuming he was joking, but he wasn't. "Daniel, it's Adele." "That's what they want you to think." The thing about delusions is that they don't shout at you. They whisper. First it's the vents, then the lamp, then your toothbrush. Daniel became convinced that someone had bugged the apartment. More specifically, that I had bugged the apartment. "You and Marcus. You think I don't know? Always whispering outside my door. He never says hi to me, but he always talks to you." Marcus was our neighbor across the hall. He was tall, smart, harmless, queer like me. That seemed to be enough for Daniel's mind to start drawing lines between dots that weren't there. I started locking my bedroom door. 3 nights later, I came home from the lab to find my external hard drive in pieces on the floor. The screws and casings scattered like bones. Daniel stood over it, holding my screwdriver. "You hit it well," he said. "What the fuck, Daniel? That is all my thesis footage!" "It's not yours. It's theirs. They planted it." I didn't sleep that night. I packed what I could. Laptop, chargers, 2 pairs of jeans, and my passport, and told him I'd be staying with a friend. His face went blank. "So you're running?" "No, I'm leaving you so you don't destroy the rest of my shit." That's when he rushed me. I didn't see it coming. He grabbed at my neck, fingers clawing like a child mimicking a monster. But he was smaller, frail even. I shoved him back and he fell onto the coffee table, cracking it down the middle. I didn't wait to see if he was hurt. I left. The housing authority moved me into a vacant dorm room the next day. Gray walls, no posters, a mattress still wrapped in plastic, a deadbolt I could trust. That night, I finally allowed myself to exhale until 2:11 a.m. A knock at my door, 3 short raps. I froze. Not many people knew I'd moved. "Who is it?" I asked through the door. Silence, then a soft voice. "It's me. I just want to talk. Daniel." "I'm calling campus security." "You already did that," he said, almost smiling. "They think I'm gone." The knock turned into banging. I shoved a chair under the doorknob and dialed 911. By the time the cops arrived, he was gone. They found him sleeping in the laundry room basement 2 floors down. No charges, just another wellness check. He's going through something, the RA told me. It's complicated. Yeah. So was my poor hard drive. The school gave me a no contact order and told me not to worry. But worry isn't a thing you can turn off like a lamp. It lives in your chest. A week later, Marcus knocked on my door. He looked shaken. Did you tell Daniel I gave you a key to my place? No, I said, frowning. You didn't. Marcus stared at the floor. He was in my room last night. I found him in the closet. He said you sent him to check my vents. I sat down. He's spiraling. He also said he saw your footage. What footage? The party one. The rooftop? I didn't get a chance to edit that yet. It wasn't backed up. It only existed on the drive Daniel had destroyed. Unless he copied it before smashing it. I stood up. He's got my files. That night, I emailed Daniel from a private account. I didn't care what the school said. Subject line, let's talk. Just us. He replied at 3:03 a.m. Room 2B. Bring your laptop. I didn't want to go. But there's a specific kind of itch artists understand. The one where something precious has been taken from you. I needed my work back. I slipped on a hoodie, tucked pepper spray into my pocket, and headed across campus. Room 2B was in a condemned building scheduled for renovation. It wasn't on any dorm map. I only knew of it because Marcus had once used it for a photo shoot. The hallway was dark. Every step echoed. The door to 2B was already open. Daniel sat cross-legged in the middle of the floor, surrounded by candlelight. The air smelled like burnt plastic and something metallic. On the wall behind him were printouts. Screenshots of me in my room, zoomed in frames from my footage, post-it notes with names and arrows. A shrine. You came, he said. I want my files. I saved them for you. He smiled. They were infected, but I scrubbed the metadata. They're clean now. You watched them? I had to. I needed to know what you knew. He reached into his backpack and handed me a thumb drive. I took it quickly. There's more, he said. Footage of them. I found cameras in my room. There were no cameras, Daniel. There were, he said, but not yours. Theirs. The ones who made you. I backed toward the door, but he didn't follow. Did you tell them where I sleep now? He asked. No one's after you. He laughed. Lies don't work on people who can see between the frames. I left. I never looked back. I didn't touch the thumb drive until the next morning. My gut told me to throw it away. But curiosity is a stubborn virus. It had my footage and something else. A folder name, Behind Their Eyes. Inside, 10 videos. All of me. Sleeping, working, changing clothes. The footage was taken from my room, my vents. I felt sick. Daniel hadn't just imagined the surveillance. He was the surveillance. I went to campus security with the drive. They said they'd review it internally, but I knew that meant nothing. I dropped out 2 days later. Marcus moved to a sublet in Glendale, and Daniel's still on the campus. Not in classes, but not gone. Some nights, I wonder if he meant to kill me, or if it was just another glitch in his system. I don't know what's worse, being hunted by a stranger, or being watched by someone who once called you roomie. The story is inspired from a real-life incident shared by one of our subscribers. This is what they said. My old roommate had a mental breakdown and became convinced that her neighbor and I, both openly queer, were spying on him through hidden devices. One night, he started dismantling my electronics, claiming they were bugged. When I told him I'd be staying elsewhere, he tried to attack me. He wasn't strong enough to do real harm, but it shook me. Having someone genuinely try to hurt you changes you. I was moved to a vacant room the next day. I've never felt the same about shared living since.
I lived alone in an off-grid house in rural Oregon. I moved here with my husband George, but our marriage turned sour pretty fast. I won't go into details, but George was a terrible man. I had to put a restraining order against him. And the worst part was, all our friends sided with him after the divorce. He had a way of twisting things to make me seem like the bad person, even though he was the real problem. It was terrible. So, even though moving here was his idea, I stayed put while he went to shack up with his new girlfriend in the next town over. Good riddance. I felt lonely sometimes, but I had plenty of chickens to keep me company. 5 of them, in fact, and I felt closer to them than to any dog or cat that I'd ever had. My favorite chicken, Henrietta, followed me around everywhere. Such a beautiful girl. One evening, I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard my chickens go absolutely wild outside. I rushed into the yard assuming that the possums were back. But there wasn't a possum outside. There was George. I saw his shadow as he crouched by the coop. "What the hell are you doing here?" George stood up and looked at me. That's when I saw Henrietta in his arms. He was stealing my girl, my Henrietta. "Stop! Give her back!" I raced after him, full of anger. Henrietta was a delicate creature. She couldn't handle the stress of being kidnapped. I almost caught up to him, but he jumped over my fence and disappeared into the forest. I went back inside and called the police to report the kidnapping. I tried to sound calm over the phone, but I was a total wreck. I could barely get the words out. And to add insult to injury, the police dispatcher laughed. She actually laughed when I told her that Henrietta was a chicken. She said that officers would go to George's house in the morning. This obviously wasn't a priority to them. But I couldn't wait that long. I had to get Henrietta back. I called George's girlfriend. Thankfully, she didn't recognize my number. I pretended to be one of George's coworkers and asked where he was. She said that he went to get dinner. I was horrified. Did that mean he was going to eat Henrietta? I forced my voice to remain neutral. Did he say what time he's getting back? She had no idea. I couldn't get any other information out of her, so I ended the call. Now I was a woman on a mission. I got in my car and sped down the highway. The drive to George's house should have taken 40 minutes. I got there in 25. He was parking in his driveway when I pulled up. I was ready to confront him, but instead, I turned off my headlights and parked across the street. I watched him carry Henrietta inside, filled with rage that he wasn't even holding her properly. Once he was inside, I got out of my car and sneaked through his backyard. I could see him and his girlfriend talking in the living room. She didn't seem happy. I guess she had no idea that he went out to steal my chicken as some sort of revenge plot against me. They argued for a bit, while Henrietta walked around their living room. Poor girl looked so confused. I tried the back door, but it was locked. Then, I noticed that one of his windows was half open. I widened it as much as I could, and I quietly climbed into the kitchen. They were both still in the living room. I could hear their voices through the wall. "It's funny! Don't you think it's funny?" "It's sick! You need to stop obsessing over your ex! And what the hell are we going to do with a damn chicken?" They kept bickering. It reminded me of how George and I used to talk to each other. He really was an annoying man. Rather than reveal myself, I crouched onto the floor and started to make quiet clicking noises. That's how I always called my chickens. I waited for Henrietta to come find me. My heart filled with joy as I saw my beautiful baby walk into the kitchen. Her feathers were a little ruffled, but she looked totally fine. And she wasn't alone. George's pug was with her. Henrietta was always good at making friends. I scooped Henrietta up in my arms, kissed her sweet head, and was ready to take her back home. Then, a dark thought crossed my mind. If George was going to steal from me, well, then I was going to steal from him. I tucked his pug under my other arm, quietly opened the kitchen door, and disappeared into the night. A half hour later, I was back home. Henrietta was safe in her coop, and George's pug was walking around my living room. It didn't take long for George to call. He knew what I'd done. He demanded his dog back. Of course, as soon as you tell me why you took Henrietta. I sat next to my laptop and turned on the audio recorder, just in case I needed to get his confession. I took her because I was angry. I wanted to hurt you. But I promised to stay away forever. Are you happy? That was all I needed to hear. I was about to tell him to come pick up his pug, but at that exact second, his stupid dog ran straight into the wall. He yelped in pain. I guess George thought that I was hurting his dog, and he absolutely flipped out. I could hear him crying on the phone. I'm sorry, Sarah. Please. I was a terrible husband. You deserved better. He kept going, apologizing for everything he'd ever done to me, including things I didn't even remember. He sounded so pitiful. And it was all because he was afraid of what I would do to his dog. I have no idea why some people are so attached to their dogs. It's weird. He went on and on, just totally breaking down. When he was finished, I had an extremely embarrassing recording. The next day, I dropped off his pug. We shook hands and we agreed to never see each other again. I went back home to spend some quality time with Henrietta and the girls. Oh, and of course, I sent his voice recording to all our friends. Served him right. This story is loosely inspired from a real-life incident. A 50-year-old man from Port Orchard, Washington was arrested in late March after allegedly breaking into his ex-girlfriend's home and kidnapping her pet chicken, named Polly, in violation of an active protection order. According to the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office, deputies responded to a 911 call in the early hours of March 29th, reporting that the suspect had kicked down the victim's back door while shouting, "I've got Polly!" before fleeing the scene, clutching the fowl.